Serious, retired soldiers on Reddit, what was something that you saw or experienced that you never shared with anyone? Okay, so this is definitely going to make me out to be an asshole, but it happened and it's not a story I share to anyone. I was in Iraq for 7 months doing convoy security. We would drive all over the country delivering supplies and personnel wherever we were ordered to. It wasn't uncommon for all the kids of smaller villages to run along and roadside asking for muffins or Gatorades or any other thing they could. At first we would regularly throw snacks to them. It was cool seeing their smiling faces after they caught a chocolate muffin or a fruit punch Gatorade. We'd feel like Santa Claus winning the hearts and minds of the younger generations, ensuring they would never turn to terrorism. Winning the war on terror one muffin at a time. But of course things changed. Another unit had an accident and a couple kids got run over or hurt, basically trying to catch snacks being thrown to them. So our new standard of procedure was to not give out anything whatsoever in order to keep the kids from grouping around our vehicles as we'd roll through their towns. This didn't stop them from gathering, and it almost made them more desperate in their attempts to get anything from us. Even asking for waters, which was something they would actually reject when we were throwing snacks at them. So we're rolling through this city at a painfully slow speed. Reports of IEDs being found near. I've read this 3 times in the last 5 minutes. My brain doesn't want to accept that this kind of callous evil exists. Edit, for everyone requesting that I repost the story. If the op decided he doesn't want it out there, I'm not going to circumvent his wishes. Edit again, gold. Thanks. What makes the human species successful is not violence and rampant selfishness. It's adaptability and social cooperation. I'm serious, research it. We may be very, very prone to being absolute fucks, but is not what made us successful as a species. Don't buy into that stupid lie. What makes us truly strong is our ability to adapt and cooperate. It's the hallmark of every successful species that can survive environmental change. The tigers are endangered, not because they are not mighty macho raw enough, but because they cannot adapt to the changing circumstances we are forcing upon them. The people who become like rabid dogs when the shit hits the fan are the less adaptive people. The ones who would shoot people for short-term gain do so because they are incapable of cooperating and adapting to secure long-term gains. They're ultimately doomed. When I was a boy and I would see scary things in the news, my mother would say to me, "Look for the helpers. You will always find people who are helping." Mr. Rogers. Anyone watching that horrific scene will remember you for being one of the helpers. Thank you. Using a throwaway because I've never told anyone before and I don't think I ever could. On a motorcade patrol in Afghanistan, our point vehicle struck an IED. My best friend was thrown about 10 yards from the wreckage, and impaled through the chest with a piece of metal. His face was blown half off. I'll never forget it. I recognized half of his face, and the other half was charred bone. He died in my arms. About 2 years later, I finally got stateside, and went to see his family. They told me he wrote to them every day, and when the letters stopped coming, they knew he was gone. His 5-year-old daughter asked me how her daddy died. I didn't know what to say. I haven't told anyone this entire story as it isn't something I'm comfortable talking to people about face to face, but I feel it's probably something people should know and think about at least. I was deployed to a place called the Triangle of Death in Iraq in a little town called Yusufiyah. We had been there for 6 months with a lot of intense fighting and were set to rotate to southern Iraq in a much less active spot. We were set to be replaced by the 502nd AR, part of the 101st Airborne. They had been a large part of the initial invasion of Iraq against Saddam's forces, but this was 2005 and was a much different war. When you transition units in the military, there is a period where you integrate, front seat/back seat rides, where you show the incoming unit your current operations. I happened to be at an outpost by one of two remaining bridges across the Euphrates River when this started. We tried to caution them, show them the ropes, but they didn't want to listen to any of us. They kept saying we have a destiny along with other hyper-aggressive statements. They didn't even seem to see the Iraqis as human beings. They were just like, we're gonna fuck this place up and fuck them. Rape, kill, pillage and burn. Whoa. Across the street from this particular outpost was an Iraqi guy, and his family who owned the small farm around the outpost. They had been really good to us, pointing out IEDs on roads as well as running and grabbing us food and supplies when we couldn't get any. For example, our supply truck was destroyed by an IED one time, so all we had were MREs to eat. We talked to the farmer and gave him a shopping list and money, and he bought us food at the local marketplace. He was a great guy, and did stuff like that for us all the time. We took the 502nd guys on a foot patrol, and the farmer came out of his house, greeting us as he usually did, making his way towards us. We waved and started talking to him. When he went to shake the hand of one of the 502nd privates, the private just hauled off and punched him in the mouth, shouting "fucking sand nigger." Our platoon sergeant restrained him and sent him back to the outpost with my sergeant, and I to escort him while he tried to placate the farmer. We took that private to his sergeant, who congratulated him. When our platoon sergeant got back, he tore them a new one, but they didn't seem to care. I wasn't privy to the conversation between my platoon sergeant and his, but it didn't seem to have any impact either. Their attitude persisted until we finally left to our new location. Turns out, these same people were these guys. They murdered that farmer's family a few months after we left and raped his daughter. As if this wasn't enough, a few months prior to this, I had been injured when my truck rolled over during a firefight. I was the gunner, maybe 200 meters from where the killings took place. I had to be medevaced to Baghdad, where I recovered for a few weeks. When the truck rolled over, I lost my wallet in the dirt out there in what we call Iraqi moon dust, which is a powdery silt-type soil you find all over. Flash forward to a week or two after the killings took place. I receive a package from Sergeant Green. It's my wallet, mailed March 12, 2006, the same day as the killings. I recognize it's highly unlikely it happened just like this, but I can't help but wonder if they found my wallet on their way to commit the murders, or even if they mailed it just before it happened. I'm not a religious person, I'm an atheist, but I like to think that it was perhaps the universe's way of trying to remind them of the front seat, back seat period with our unit, where we had a simple message for them: treat people with respect and like human beings, it is all they want. I still have the wallet, I've had it since high school, old Calvin Klein leather wallet my sister gave me. It reminds me of the farmer and his family. I can't help but wonder if maybe we had been more focused on getting our message across to that 502nd group if this could have been avoided. Maybe we were in too much of a hurry to leave to safer territory that we neglected something that might have made a difference. We even had the option to volunteer to stay in UCFR with the 502nd if we wanted, but I declined, not out of fear of combat as I was comfortably numb to it at that point, but because I just wanted to go relax and was homesick. It makes me think that I could have made a difference but didn't because of something simplistically selfish. It's probably silly to think that, and perhaps a bit cliché, but it is what I think. Not what I know you were looking for, but here it goes. I was never the popular kid in high school and got picked on a lot throughout my entire K-12 education. I joined up at 17 to get away from home and start earning my own money. I also got picked on a lot in basic. Soldiers spend more time fighting each other than the enemy. It's not that way for everyone, but enough so that it's sad. Anyways, I wasn't the lowest on the rung in basic, luckily. It was another guy in his early 20s. He was a nerd like me, but he also messed up and failed a lot, your typical Gomer Pyle. I won't list all his infractions as I can't remember them all. But one night we were out in the field doing training, it was like 5 to 6 weeks in and we were doing land nav. My fire watch had just ended, so I headed to the only porta-john in our area to relieve myself before racking out again. I get there and the door is locked, so I knock and ask how long they were going to be. He asked, "Dr. Psych, is that you?" It was Gomer Pyle, of course. "Yeah man, hurry up, I've got to go. I can't man, the guy before me shit on the seat, and I couldn't see, and I sat in it." Freaking Gomer Pyle. Okay man, just stay there. Where was he going to go? He'll be back with some baby wipes and hand sanitizer. Could you bring me my spare uniform too? I think I got some on it. Sure man? I never told any of the other guys about it. His life was hard enough and I'm no longer in contact with them, so there's no way for this to get back to the guy. I can't even remember his name anymore. TLDR, fellow soldier sat in shit, I helped him out. Posting this on a throwaway account. Long story short, killed an entire family during the Vietnam War without showing a single emotion. We were insensitive to even the most gut-churning things you could ever imagine. A father, mother, and 2 daughters. Our commander didn't give a shit if it had been nothing but school children in that house. Everyone had to die. They were accused of harboring weapons for the Viet Cong. I have nightmares every night. I lived in a safe house in the Kabul Green Zone a couple of years ago, working on ISAF HQ but moving throughout Kabul every day. The street from my compound to ISAF was filled with pedestrian traffic and these kids who would try to sell foreigners whatever trinkets they could. I got to know them since I was there every day. I got them clothes for winter, random snacks from the chow hall, and we played Angry Birds together. They spoke with me, brought me scarves I asked for and little gifts every once in a while. They also kept the other peddlers away. One day a kid, 12 to 14 years old, from elsewhere came to the area with a bomb in his backpack. He intended to kill foreigners moving in the area or target one of the compounds. The local kids noticed him, and apparently told him to get lost, and he detonated his bomb. 4 kids were killed along with the bomber and a couple of adults. A dozen? Or so injured maybe. I knew each one of the kids. Kushi, a little girl who was learning to skate, Nawab, who, in my view of things, looked to have a hard crush on one of the other girls who was killed. Another boy had a brother a year or so older who looked just like him. I saw the one killed and saw the other a week later, trying to sell things again. It freaked me out. I was at the site of the bombing not 30 minutes before I felt it while inside ISAF. Seeing the bodies after was a mistake. I didn't need to be there. I walked by the site every day until I left that base. The night of the attack I could still smell blood and the damp smell of wet Kabul dust mixed together. Every day I went by I could see their bodies and the surrounding gore in my head. I have seen the aftermath of Veeds in Iraq where hundreds were killed, but something about knowing those faces so well. Kids that would have done well if not born into such a backwards shithole. It didn't help that right after my ex told me I deserved to see those things since I chose to be there again. Sorry for rambling, but I'm not sure which aspects of it all to tell. This is where the bomb went off only a few days before it actually happened. The boy is Nawab, oldest of those killed. I don't remember the girl's name, but she is the one Nawab liked. I always loved seeing them together because it just seemed wonderful to see a couple of kids flirting with one another in a place where you just don't expect that. The bomber detonated in front of those steps by the pole, and both metal gates on the sides of the shop were completely shredded by the blasts. Edit, words, /picture/ and thank you all for the kind words. Joking answer, a shit ton of dicks. Seriously, infantrymen are like little kids, always running around butt naked. Serious answer, we were ordered to shoot/bayonet any bodies we came across because the militia had a habit of playing possum only to kill coalition troops later. Well, in Iraqi summer heat, after a few days of laying there, the bodies will puff up. They get super bloated, and just nasty overall. But you can't always tell, especially if they're all covered up. Well, when you shoot/bayonet/kick a bloated body, they tend to pop. And out comes the nastiest smell and a disgusting liquid pus/goo. Jesus, nothing smells that bad, and the goo/pus gets all over your boots, or uniform, or rifle, or God help you, your mouth. Much vomit was spewed forth, many memories cemented forever. Edit, 9 times out of 10, it was easy to tell they were dead. After being hit with 105 mm, 40 mm, 25 mm, .50, 7.62, 5.56 or 9 mm rounds, there usually wasn't much left. What was left was also food for the fleet of feral dogs that followed us. So, if we came across an intact body, it was either alive and waiting, or had been passed over by the dogs. I still have nightmares about pointing my weapon at little kids. I'm terrified to have kids because of it. Brother, this is what haunts me the most. I remember the fear in the eyes of a little girl who came around the corner into the line my .50 was pointed, and her mom coming around after her, and they both froze and just stared at me in terror. I elevated the gun and waved them past and tried to smile to show them it was okay, but I remember that little girl's fear and I thought of my daughter feeling that way and it tore me up. Still does. Pointed my weapon at a lot of people, but that girl stays with me. I know others have been through and done worse, and shit I saw worse myself, but that girl stays with me. The feeling of not feeling anything after killing someone is crazy. It's not like you're stone cold, no emotion. But think of it as you're a waiter at a restaurant and you serve your customers. You don't think anything of it when it's happening. You just do and carry on. It doesn't hit you until later and you're like, motherfucker, I just did that. The emotion of everything is so bland when it happens, but so raw when you take a step back. Whenever you have a buddy that gets killed, yeah, it's scary, but it doesn't hit you until later. Every moment in that person's life had led up to that moment. It's concluded, over, done. Every first kiss, every Friday night football game, every person they ever had any contact or relationship with, everything they ever said, every plan they ever had or memory they had created came to a conclusion in a single moment that ended their entire existence. TLDR. Life is precious, don't take it for granted. My very first patient in Afghanistan was a 10-month girl. The father brought her to our gate asking for help. We checked her out and she is literally missing all of the skin from shoulder blade to waist on her back left side. Burned to the bone. Dad tells Terp that she tripped and got cut up by gravel. Clearly she is burned. I can smell it still today. I can remember the screech she made. The charred skin I had to remove. And that asshole just sat in the corner. Nothing I can do to right the situation other than do what I can for her. That single moment definitely set the tempo for the following 9 months. This happened stateside. I was a MP for 5 years. Many fucked up and some hilarious stories. This is the most fucked up one. We get a call for a health and welfare check at one of the on-post houses. We get these all the time, usually hoarders. We go in and it's the same old hoarder bullshit. Dirty diapers and animal shit piled waist high in the corner, kicking trash out of the way to walk through, moldy rotten dishes in the sink, etc. We are going room to look at everything, and that's when I see it. A baby in its crib, not moving and blue in the face. I call for the supervisors on the radio and EMS. I grab the baby and turn it over. There's blood coming from its mouth. I update EMS. I yell to my partner to restrain the father. Mother was deployed, he does. I don't know what to do, I'm not trained for this, never did CPR on a baby. I do what I can and it's barely breathing, and has a faint heartbeat. SUPs show up, shortly followed by EMS. They rush the baby to the hospital while we turn our attention to the dipshit who did this to this poor baby. Apparently the baby wouldn't stop screaming. I guess a 4-day-old diaper would do that to you, so he kept shoving a bottle in its mouth to get it to stop. He caused the frenulum to rip, hence the blood, and the baby was choking on its tongue. The baby didn't make it. We all wanted to kill this fucker, but at this point we have to baby him. Be real easy on the cuffs. No bumps or bruises. Nothing. Didn't want to give him a reason to get off. I don't remember how long he got, but I remember getting pissed that it wasn't near long enough. TL, doctor, read it, I fucking typed it. Edit, words. I'm on mobile. Hijacking this comment to post a mirror of the deleted parent. I gave a hungry kid my chow, MRE, in Liberia, saw her looking at me with big hungry eyes, so I tossed it over the wire. She was happy as fuck, sitting under a tree outside our perimeter shoveling that food into her face. She'd smile and wave at me, and I'd wave back. I was probably grinning like an idiot, too. A teenage/young dude came up and tried to snatch it from her, and she struggled with him. He shot her once in the stomach with his AK, grabbed the chow, and ran off. The whole thing took maybe 20 seconds. That little girl dug these furrows in the dirt with her heels while she was dying, like the motion you'd use to scoot under a car you were working on, only she didn't move anywhere. Scoot, 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 and she was done. I think about those marks her heels made in the dirt a lot. I guess I never really tell anyone anything unless they were directly involved. I'll try to keep them short and sweet. My engineer unit was tasked with clearing a road that had been black status for 7 years. Midway in we get ambushed by a whole village on both sides. We nearly ran out of crew-served ammo that day. What really gets me about it is that just minutes before it all went down, a mother and her child ran to safety in a nearby building. And to my recollection there wasn't a single building we didn't hit with either Mark 19 or Polish strikers. We tore that village to pieces when it was over. It doesn't really bother me, but I do wonder how much more harm we did than good. On a lighter note, in basic training one of my battles was really chafing on his ass. He couldn't quite get the baby powder in his crack. He must have really trusted me because he asked me very discreetly and I obliged. So there I am, shooting baby powder into another guy's ass. Not a retired soldier, but a naval hospital corpsman with a marine unit who deployed to Sangif Valley, Afghanistan in 2012. I've seen a lot of casualties in my short time in the Navy, but no amount of love tissue training could prepare me for my first no-shit trauma patient. It wasn't even one of my Marines who got hit. I was chilling at the battalion aid station with a group of other corpsmen getting our shit together and talking about who would survive a zombie apocalypse when we got a call that we had a patient coming in. This was about 1 week into the deployment. We had just gotten to the FOB and the majority of us were pushing out to patrol bases the next few days. I was one of the most senior corpsmen there, HM3/E4, so I was in charge of leading the team in treating this patient. We had a PA there, but he was more interested in sleeping and trusted out medical knowledge to be able to treat this patient properly. When the Vic came in I ran outside to get a good look at the patient before he came in, and I was not expecting what I saw. He was an older gentleman, probably around 70, hard to tell, and he had stepped on and died and had bilateral above the knee amputations. Tourniquets had been applied and bleeding controlled by the time he got into the BAS. My team attached monitors, applies secondary tourniquets, and got 4 access while I secured the airway. After what seemed like seconds we had finished our first and second assessment and we were waiting in the bird when the Propac stopped reading any vitals. I remember looking down at the man and seeing that there wasn't any life in his eyes. We attempted CPR for a few cycles but without blood products it was useless. I called it. We were removing all of the interventions we had done when we rolled him over and I noticed. The first time I heard the incoming alarm, day 1 of deployment into Iraq, I was in a porta shitter. I'm a devout atheist, not sure if that's how you say it, but all I could say was no God, not like this, don't let it end with me taking a shit in a backwater country. Not with my pants down. I know it's not exciting but I'm still not proud of it. This sounds like with the old breed. That was in the Pacific as well. Haunting. The Pacific was based on the book/memoir With the Old Breed, at Peleliu and Okinawa by Eugene Sledge. If I am not mistaken it was partially based on Helmet for My Pillow by Robert Leckie. Both men served together as enlisted men. What is unique is that at the time officers were typically educated while enlisted were not. However, both Sledge and Leckie were educated, a rarity. The books listed above that they wrote are unique and accurate accounts of the war by enlisted men rather than officers, which is most common from the time. 8. Highly recommend both books. I'm from nowhere, I felt this anger at Arlington. I mourned, I apologized for not having the empathy I didn't possess until then. I could never thank or support them. My grandfather's sense of humor suddenly became a badge of honor. I always saw his smile but never the burden he lived with. I mourned all the boys from every time who died and who will die. In the sea of white crosses, everywhere you turn is another wave, more people than where I'm from. Fuck. It was like being claustrophobic with the history of war. There are many things I haven't shared with anyone but I can share just a few for now. I was deployed to Panjwai, Afghanistan in 2010 to 2011 and we were the first American soldiers on that ground since Special Forces and Rangers occupied it in 2006, which was taken back over by Taliban very quickly after they left. We got called out to search for a dead enemy that a Predator drone shot earlier in the night. We found him and called it up as normal. As we were heading back to the patrol base the sun was starting to rise and we were all deadbeat, tired at this time and just ready to get in our bunks to catch some rest. We operated in Strykers, 8-wheeled medium armored vehicles, and the lead vehicle hit an enormous eye that made the front 4 tires fly at least 200 feet away. We have hit several IEDs up to this point, so we proceeded with protocol, radioing up to the down vehicle for any sustained injuries. No one answered, so a team including myself dismounted to provide support. As we walked to the vehicle, you get that gut feeling that you know it is bad, really bad. We sweep the area quickly for any more secondary IEDs and then start doing our best to get inside and help everyone. We pull the passengers in the back out who were unconscious and bleeding from the head. The driver was jammed in between a metal sheet, and unconscious as well. We had people immediately start to treat the passengers while we continued to get the driver out. Finally it budges and we free him. His entire lower body felt almost like a bowl of jello, no bones keeping it intact. The medevacs were already well on their way but we all knew there wasn't much they could do at this point. Medevacs finally arrived and escorted them back to CAF. A few hours later we made it back to base and no one slept, sitting in silence waiting for any updates or news. Finally around dinner time we heard something. We got the breaking news that the driver's pulse stopped on the helicopter to CAF. The 3 passengers in the back suffered from severe TBI, traumatic brain injury. I still keep in contact with them and they will never be the same. They have a short-term memory and can barely read or talk to anyone. The driver was 19 years old, a young, quiet, naive kid that you would never expect anything to happen to. I've experienced many things that I will never forget or tell anyone in person, but this really hit me the hardest. This was in the month of November, which is partially the reason I even decided to type this out honestly. I lost 3 close friends in this month and it is extremely difficult every time it comes around. I know I said I had a few stories to tell, but it is getting increasingly harder to type it out as I keep rambling on. Several of my fellow friends have taken their lives or seriously contemplated it from the deployments we have been on. If anyone needs to talk, I am here with you and understand everything you are going through. Convoy was stopped in some dirt village, sun was starting to go down, all the kids and females went into the building about 15 yards to my left. Bunch of pickups came into the village full of military-aged males who then went into the fields, pulled up long boxes and broke into groups, then scattered around various covers and buildings with said boxes. Gee, I wonder what is about to happen. Man, I'm glad the rules of engagement won't let us do jack shit about this. Just as the sun goes down low and behold an ambush from the west with rockets and RPK fire. Gunner is pointed west, to the right, and doing what gunners do at times like this. As the sun sets and twilight turns to dark, full-on Star Wars mode is engaged, tracers everywhere. The first component attacked when the sun touched the ground from the west, second wave hit us from the east when the sun disappeared. Guy came out of the building to my left with a rocket, kicked open the truck door and put my optics on the guy's chest, to see a kid's face, completely terrified kid's face. Don't know if I shot. I know the fire support with the 30mm chain gun did. It blew them away in 4x zoom along with the small building they came out of. First time posting, so try and cut me some slack. For obvious reasons I'll keep this very general. Be advised, severe trigger warning. I was in transit to a new command, and I was posted in temporary duty under the base security where I was flying out from. While there, they had me do fingerprinting, and lots of paperwork for them until one day they told me they were going to need another body with them. I'm military police, so they figured they could have me tag along. We respond to a call of a woman smuggling marijuana, and selling it off base. We pull her aside from her workplace as discreetly as possible, which is tough to do, considering everyone in the building recognized us as base police, and tell her we need to search her vehicle. She hands over her keys, and one guy talks to her to keep her distracted, while myself and the other guy search through her vehicle. I find 4 prescription bottles, filled to the lid with marijuana. At this point, I look at the other guy with me, and he bags them and takes the woman to the patrol vehicle to go check her in. Here's why I don't tell this story. This woman has severe PTSD. It was so bad that I couldn't ride in the car with them. Her screams were animalistic. She sounded like a tortured creature in the backseat of the squad car, and she was clawing at the door to get out. It wrenched my stomach more than the cheese omelette MRE. Eventually, I get to the station after them, and they of course have me do her fingerprinting and paperwork, when she tells me her story. She was stationed at a country where she was driving a government vehicle for work errands, and a pedestrian ran out in the road and she hit them. The local police were the first responders, and instantly locked her up in an all-female prison, while her command fought the local police for her to be released to U.S. custody. While in this prison, she said the guards would walk in while 2 women were sleeping and randomly rape inmates. She would wake up in the middle of the night to screams of women fighting for their lives, and she developed a severe paranoia of when her turn would come. After her eventual release, that paranoia manifested into an extreme PTSD that was triggered when locked in confined spaces, hence her reaction in the back of the squad vehicle. She didn't sell the marijuana, it was the only thing that calmed her down. I finished my shift that day, and called my sister up and bawled. I could never tell her about this day, because this girl was the spitting image of my sister. My father now suffers from war-caused PTSD, but the most memorable thing he told me from war were the children who would beg for candy outside the base camp every day. Him and his friends would play with them over the few months he was there. One day he returned to the children slaughtered and decapitated outside the base. Edit, spelling. During the invasion of Iraq, civilians would line the road begging for food and water. We were approaching the edge of a no-name village just south of Al-Hilah, Babylon, and there was another large group of civilians begging. We had already been briefed not to give them anything, as many of them were obviously army, short haircuts, a few days beard, that had either defected or were Fedayeen in disguise. Also, we barely had enough for ourselves, we were moving too fast for our supply lines to keep up. Anyway, there was this group of civilians begging. And then, at the edge, away from anyone else, was a little girl. She was crying and holding her hands out to us. She didn't look much older than my own child, who was a toddler at the time. This girl was maybe 5 or 6. She was separate from the group, no family nearby. We figured they were already dead. Her cries were completely silent, she just held her hands out there, tears running down her face, her mouth open. My gunner said, "Fuck this, someone hand me an MRE." Someone else tossed him one up. The interpreter, an Iraqi as well, said, "No, mister, don't do that." Of course, the gunner ignored him. The driver slowed down and the gunner tossed the MRE down to the girl. She picked it up and ran towards the remains of some roadside market stand made of reeds and dried palm fronds. As we sped up, we noticed the group moving towards her. They surrounded her. The gunner spun his gun back around and screamed for them to get back. They didn't. About 5 or 6 adults swarmed on her. A second later, 2 or 3 broke from the group, fighting. One had the MRE packet. She was laying there and the gunner yelled, "Fuck, she's bleeding, stop the truck." She was dead. They beat her to death over an MRE. Hate to be that guy, but I actually have a story my grandfather shared from his time during the Pacific Theater back during World War II. My grandfather never had a glorious job in the Navy. He was a cook. He spent hours upon hours cooling and cleaning. Even though he was a cook, he also had 4 confirmed Japanese zero kills in his time. He was a part of the carrier group that left Pearl before the attack, and he was also on the USS Springfield in its trip from the US to Iwo Jima when they transported the atomic bombs. He thankfully was transferred off the Springfield at Iwo and put on another ship. On to the story. After the surrender, he got to walk around Hiroshima to witness the aftermath of the atomic bomb that had been dropped there. He was assisting with cooking and helping Japanese citizens. He described in detail seeing people disfigured, burnt, half dead and deformed from the blast. But the thing he described in detail to me that I will always remember was he walked down a road and past a concrete wall that was still standing after the blast. It wasn't very tall, just about 5 feet tall. But he said if you looked on the concrete wall there were outlines, and he said the one outline that stood out was obviously a parent shielding their child. Of course there was no real detail to tell what or who it was, but he said the way it looked was obvious that a child and her parent were there at that moment. He said the feeling that he was looking at the only thing left of a parent and their child instantly vaporized by a force only comparable to that of the sun frightened him. Of course he had a lot more memories of sailors burning alive after a kamikaze struck their ship or men being cut in half by the wing of a kamikaze diver. He died in 2000. From cancer. After the war he worked at the nuclear power plant and helped install the reactor in Port Lavaca, Texas. He also scraped asbestos off of pipes and also chewed tobacco and smoked 2 packs a day minimum since the 40s. I have the pictures he took from the aftermath somewhere in a box. I'll see if I can find them. An early morning salvo of 3 rockets blew a tent near my hut to bits while I was in Afghanistan. I ran over to the HESCO bunker in my sleep. After I had come to a little bit, I was checking what I had with me. This is the part that I've never really shared with anyone else, but I didn't notice for a minute, I only had on my combat shirt, Kevlar, and weapon, and then was completely nude from the waist down. Underscore. I was porky pigging it while shit was blowing up around us, it's all I could think about. I felt really awkward about it, even though I've seen and been seen naked by everyone there. I think I just really didn't want to be caught up in a fight without pants. It was racing through my mind, if there's a perimeter breach, I need to get to my Foot Locker first and get some pants on. I was rehearsing it in my mind. Ha ha. Luckily the laundry tent took the brunt of the attack. But that really put us back on clean clothes for a bit. As an infantryman, I had plenty of bad experiences in Afghanistan. Plenty I haven't told people. However, I had some very unique and beautiful experiences. I have never told anyone this story. My platoon was probably a month and a half into our 1-year-long deployment. The area we were responsible for patrolling was remote and poor even by Afghan standards. It would take us probably 2 hours by vehicle to get to our area of operations, the district we were responsible for patrolling. That was just getting to it, not including the farthest villages in the district we were responsible for patrolling. Since it would take us so long to get there, we would drive there and then set up shop in this abandoned school for 2 to 3 days, and run patrols out of there. One day, we returned from our regular day patrol. We had a couple hours of downtime before we would set out for our night patrol. It was late afternoon/early evening, and I was sitting outside under the Afghan sun with my body armor on, but no helmet. Just taking in the scenery. Looking out over the countryside, I saw these 3 girls, probably around 10 to 12 years of age, frolicking in a field. Just being young girls. I remember they were dressed in brightly colored dresses and hijabs, one purple and one red. Can't remember the other. They were maybe 150 to 200 meters away. The scene of them playing in this farm field, with mountains in the background, was a very idyllic setting, so I decided to try and take a photo of them. I had a small case on my body armor with my camera in it. I reached down to take it out and take a photo, but they scurried away. A minute or so later, they returned, so I tried again. Again, they scurry away. This repeats several more times. I remember thinking, damn it, stay still for a second so I can take a photo? Then I realized, they were watching me. They knew I was going for my camera, and they would scurry away when I went for it. This was before I realized certain cultures' aversions to having their photo taken, let alone without their permission. It turned into a game. I would quickly touch my camera case, and they would scurry away, then come back giggling. Repeat. Then they started playing like a Simon Says game with me. They would make little motions with their hands, do the raccoon eyes, and whatnot. I would mimic them, and then they would look at each other giggling. Eventually, it got dark and they had to leave. I think about those little girls often. It helped realize the beauty in that country. Despite all the destruction and death that was their home. That is where their lives would take place. What has become of their lives? I hope that they can know some semblance of peace in their lives. I served with 2 para in the British Army. I joined up in 2009 and only recently got out on a medical discharge. A mortar round destroyed a lot of nerves in my back. I still have 100% mobility, but I can't feel my lower middle back, so I can't be a paratrooper anymore. I've been out for a while now, and so many people ask me ridiculously stupid questions on a subject they know absolutely nothing about, and I couldn't explain if I tried. Things like, did you kill anyone? And did you drive any tanks, and other stupid shit like that. Gets right on my nerves. Ironic. I do have one fairly traumatic story though. My platoon was out on patrol and we were coming across this irrigated field in a loose staggered formation, so we were pretty spread out. If an eyed goes off, minimal casualties. So we are walking on this field and then someone from a well-concealed position opens fire on us, followed. My grandfather was a combat medic who fought on seemingly all of the Japanese-held islands during World War II. We always noticed he poured himself a glass of gin, and a glass of whiskey. He would always whisper something to himself, then take the entire glass of whiskey in one swig, then proceed to enjoy his glass of gin slowly. Nobody ever questioned it. After he passed away, my uncle revealed to us why, while attacking one of the beaches, a dear friend of my grandfather's dove on top of him to shield my grandfather from an explosion. My grandfather was unscathed, but his friend was killed instantly. Whiskey was apparently the friend's one true love, since he didn't have a sweetie back home. My grandfather enjoyed the glass of whiskey every day plus his gin for 50 years until his passing. Made a throwaway for this. I've never been able to tell my loved ones about this. Sometimes you want to spare them the knowledge of just how much darkness there is inside of you. I'm not sure how I feel about telling complete strangers either, but it's been burning a hole inside of me for some time now. I made the mistake of falling in love with a fellow Marine. We kept it a secret, of course, for professional reasons. We deployed together, and still, no one knew. We never touched each other, made eyes at each other, or ever did anything that would be inappropriate during the deployment, which was torture in and of itself. A few months into the deployment, we were passing out food, candy, and other supplies to a village. It was part of the whole hearts and minds thing. A little girl walked up to get some candy from the man I was in love with. She couldn't have been more than 6 years old. She was holding a doll that someone had given her, with an eye sewn into it. As soon as she took the candy from his hand, the eye detonated. It blew both of them apart instantly. Injured 3 other people. I couldn't scream. I couldn't cry. I just remember watching it happen. I don't even remember hearing anything. I think the worst part was picking up the pieces of him afterward, picking up his arms that had held me but were now in shreds. I don't even know how to describe what it felt like. It's so cliché to say, but a big piece of me died that day. Question: what would have happened to you if you would have shot that bastard? Not op, but spent time overseas watching the native assholes be assholes to each other. Basically, we had very strict rules of engagement about what we were and were not allowed to engage. In Op's case, he was not in immediate danger. His position, facility, and equipment was not in immediate danger. If he would have shot the guy, as deserved as it might be, Op likely would have effectively ended his career for firing on a non-combatant, and could possibly have ended up in prison. Essentially, shooting a civilian that posed no immediate threat to him. What you have to realize is that when the US government sends us on all expense-paid trips to wherever, we are there with a specific mission, and acting as a local police force is rarely anywhere in that purview. Like in Afghanistan, in the towers, providing security for an air base, the local kids were just little shits. Constantly taunting us, and throwing rocks. And more than once, Kid A would piss off Kid B enough to go get Dad, and Dad would beat the absolute shit out of Kid A. Then Dad would argue and fight with other Dad. All of this meters in front of us. Nothing we can do. Now, as to the rock throwing, I'm not going to unload my machine gun on a 7-year-old that is throwing rocks at me. I will, however, employ a precision, wrist-mounted, rapid acceleration device to give the young lad his rocks back at a high rate of speed. Not my fault if can't catch them. Take note though, if Dad came around and complained that GIs were pelting his kids with rocks from a slingshot from the towers, we all would have gotten our asses handed to us by our leadership. We all felt it worth it thought, to try and make the tower duty a little safer. Veteran here, did funeral detail multiple times. This never got easy. Every time, you'd be standing there watching a family weep and let out their sorrow in front of you. A lot of the times I caught myself staring at the body before we would get started, just knowing that one day that will be me and this will be my family. It's hard to stay concentrated, and to not break down with them sometimes. When you have a widow come up and thank you for coming out and performing their funeral, it sticks with you. The look in their eyes are forever etched in my memory. It was the most humbling and depressing experiences of my life. They truly grounded me in the reality of everything though. Especially during those rides on the way back, you can tell it fucks with everyone. On the way to the service people are talking and preparing for what we have to do. On the way back, everyone just stares out the window and pops in their headphones. I'm sure every news outlet would be more than happy to help call attention to this problem. They have tried. A huge number of women are sexually abused in the military, it's hidden and silenced away. No one wants to think of their boys raping their own, like how football players get public support when they rape women. Everyone knows it happens, everyone stays quiet because of blind patriotism. I'm ashamed of what I've become. I no longer feel human. I feel like something inside of me is terribly wrong and I'm afraid that it's never going to get better. I can't talk for everyone, but I felt like I had to set aside my humanity in order to survive and do the things I did. At first it was great. I'd set it aside and I'd feel distant/alone/disconnected for a short time, which was better than feeling pain/fear/regret. Then it started happening more and more often without me even thinking about it. Pretty soon it was the norm. I felt like I was no longer in control. I felt like I was in the passenger seat, and I was just spectating. I think a wire got crossed for good. Even now I struggle with controlling my disconnect/rage. It can be the stupidest thing that can set me off. The rage I feel is hard to explain. It's akin to the flight or flight response, well, at least to me. I feel this smoldering heat in my chest that spreads and becomes unbearable. Then my head feels euphoric, almost like I'm high and having sex. It's fleeting as fuck. Then the cold indifference kicks in and I accept everything and anything, no matter how fucked up it might be. I will never be 100% normal ever again, and I'm deeply ashamed of it. It makes me feel weak and exposed. I don't feel like I deserve happiness or love. Yet I keep going because other people I care about love me and their happiness depends on me being alive. I've lost track of the number of times I've looked up at the sky and thought to myself, what a beautiful day to die. One day my suffering and self-loathing will end, but until that day I will be here waiting impatiently. I've been ready for the end for years, my friends are waiting for me at the end of oblivion. I need to better myself for myself and those that depend on me. I'm going to have a really late start, but I need to go to college and get a decent degree so I can get a decent career. It's a daunting task emotionally, mentally, and financially to me, but I think it's for the best. Also I love dogs. Dogs were like rats in my neighborhood of Al-Hilar, Iraq. Me and a group of guys operated out of a house in the middle of the city. We ate local food, employed local guards, a barber, a cook, and translators. Everything we did was a bit of a community action. We were neighbors with these people. Every night the dogs right across the river that bordered our house would be howling, yipping, fighting, and carrying on. Often, a rifle shot would ring out as one of the locals would try to quiet the dogs to get some sleep, but it was futile. Usually, it just riled them up more. I was on the rooftop pretty often watching for troublemakers across the river. Lots of times, folks would use the night as cover to try to sneak up the tops of abandoned buildings near us, and cut down power lines to get and sell the copper in them. This is dangerous, obviously, so I'd just fire a flare. or cluster grenade from our M79 above their heads to scare them off. Mostly, though, what I was doing was watching those dogs through my night optics. It was calming to watch them. It was like a Nat Geo show. One night 5 or 6 of our team guys came up to the roof armed, and just said, "We can't sleep." I joined them at the ledge and we opened fire on the dogs. It was that strange place between discomfort and peer pressure. I knew that team sleep was more important than native dogs. I knew that dogs were different sort of animals in that part of the world. It made me feel like garbage. We must have killed 60 of them. Their bodies lined the bank of the river the next morning. People came out of their houses, stood on the banks of the river on top of all the dogs, kicking them, dancing around them, and cheering at us. Clapping their hands, blowing kisses, etc. high fives and hand shakes all around from our employed locals. I feel like vomiting thinking about it now. I grew up on a farm. I'm used to animals dying. Even there, on mission, we rolled with a K9. If there was a native dog on our objective, it died first. We couldn't risk an infected bite to our team dog. It makes perfect logical sense from a tactical standpoint. I'm rambling now. Trying to justify it to myself or others, I don't know. I killed so many dogs. I just try to ignore it now. I have a gorgeous golden retriever that means the world to me. I feel like garbage. It nearly affected me more than things I've experienced with other human beings. Not sure what that says about me. Like the larger part of the people in the military, when I was deployed, I didn't see any combat. I never left the FOB and I never fired my weapon at a person. But that doesn't mean I didn't experience anything terrifying. Rocket and mortar attacks were the scariest thing in my world in both Iraq and Afghanistan. I deployed to Iraq in 2008, 3 mere months out of 8, and experienced my first mortar attack less than a month in country. We were hit by multiple mortars shortly after lunch one day in July 2008. None came too close to where we were working at and a few didn't detonate when they hit the ground. One that did was the one that landed the closest to our work area and was probably within 100 feet of the bunker that went into when the warning sirens went off. That night I went to the gym to lift a little and then get in a few games of basketball. The FOB I was on was a blackout. FOB. What this means is, after the sun goes down, there are very, very few outside lights on. Mainly small lights on a few buildings, light shining out of a window or tent or the flashlight you carry with you. Unfortunately for me, while I was playing basketball, someone snatched my flashlight from where I left it with my stuff, so I had to walk back to my tent in complete darkness. It was roughly a mile from the gym to my tent but felt like 10. Everything I heard sounded like incoming rounds and time seemed to drag on. By the time I was able to successfully navigate back to my tent, I was drenched in more sweat than when I left the gym. I quickly took a shower, ran back to my bed in the tent and quietly cried myself to sleep. All I could think of is how scared I was and how I couldn't control what scared me. I couldn't control when, or where the mortars came from. All I wanted to do was make it back from the country and into my wife's arms. It took me over a year to tell my wife that we had had mortar attacks in Iraq, but I never told her what happened the rest of that night. I've seen someone with their face blown off, someone with a hand missing and someone with half their torso missing. I was in a dining facility when a mortar came through the roof and didn't detonate. Yet none of that scared me as much as the first night of my first mortar attack. There are some very terrible stories on here, too many of which I can relate with. Although there were much worse things that happened daily, there is one instance that still stands out in my mind. We were patrolling West Baghdad and had stopped to talk with some of the locals. This was in early 2004 when we didn't really know what it is they wanted out of us, but we were trying to win hearts and minds and stay alive in the process. The interpreter and I were talking to a family about something trivial, providing dumpsters for their trash I believe, and their 8-year-old son was climbing all over me like a monkey. The right thing to do would have been to keep my distance from the boy and keep situational awareness, but it was nice to be looked at as a human, not an occupying force. Out of nowhere we were hit with a series of 10 to 15 small but rapid mortars. My squad had 2 fairly serious injuries, but what sticks with me is the boy took some serious shrapnel as well. A few of us took shelter beside the Humvees that were there, and the rest of us, myself included, jumped into the back of a Bradley armored personnel carrier. Once we were in, the crew raised the back ramp and took off. The last thing I seen as the ramp was going up was the father running towards our vehicle with his son in his arms. I can't shake that memory. I can only assume he was bringing his son to us for help, and we closed the door on him and took off. I have no idea what happened to the boy, but I feel immense guilt for what happened. He would be an adult now. I wonder how his life has worked out. This photographer was with us that day. She rotates her pictures, but a couple from the attack are on this page. My own too. Sense on her, fuck Sherlyn Borkgren. She fabricated stories, blatantly lied on her articles, and put my men in danger more than once in order to sell a story. This is the sort of thing that should be on the news. Everyone needs a real dose of reality when it comes to war. Fuck war so hard. You think the government wants the general public to have an accurate view on war? You think the general public wants to have an accurate view on war? Most people would much prefer so say the token thank you for your service and pay for the occasional soldier's Starbucks at the airport without having to actually think about the messy details. That's the social contract we've established over the past 13 years. The general public embraces the whole hero sacrifice role of the military, and in turn they don't get directly affected by our nation's conflicts abroad. Mostly stuff like picking up body parts after an explosion, or watching strays run away with them. Killing people or animals for reasons that were kind of weird but justifiable. Basically my least favorite experiences that remind me what anyone is capable of when pressed beyond normal limits. My least favorite story is shooting someone up on a ridge while we were getting mortared. We shot at M to pin M down until our airstrike arrived. It was a pretty casual setting, a few mortars were landing sporadically, none within kill range, and we were in armored vehicles anyways. We saw what looked like people launching mortars at us up on a ridge nearby, and there were obviously mortar shells landing around us. A village elder actually ran up to me and was yelling some shit. Our interpreter told me that he was saying that the people on the ridge were actually women doing some blasting. Obviously wasn't believable, and we called in an airstrike. The fucked up thing to my mind is that we could have easily just kept driving. Instead we parked inside a mortar attack to call in an airstrike. I'm pretty sure they were the ones mortaring us. It's just really weird in that it didn't seem like a dangerous situation at all, even with sporadic mortars landing within 100 meters or so. The whole thing is usually just so surreal that I never really took it seriously. I was the guy sunbathing naked on top of our HMMWV at the COP, or taking a piss in the middle of the road while people were shooting at us from far away. It wasn't that serious. The weirdest thing to me, I guess, is that despite being in quite a few firefights, I didn't really see the results of them. I was never in really close combat, and we mostly just got shot at while driving and returned fire. We would call in artillery or airstrikes on positions and shoot at people and then just drive away down the road. I saw plenty of dead people, but very few that we actually killed. So despite shooting at people a fair amount, I really don't know for sure if I ever actually hit anyone. It's kind of a weird feeling. I'm not a soldier, but my father served 2 tours. He told me I'm the only person he ever told this to. He's a helicopter mechanic. Him and his company often did something the military calls Air Force checks, when they didn't completely understand the manual. It's when you go to one helicopter, see how it's set up, then compare it to another helicopter and see if everything matches up. One day the chopper him and his crew were in charge of, something malfunctioned, and they crashed, and they all died. He said it will always haunt him that he didn't double-check the aircraft, that he didn't do something that could save those young men's lives. There was no enemy, no fire, no explosion. Something just malfunctioned and they crashed and died. He only ever brought it up once when we were taking a walk together, and has never spoken of it since. I don't blame him. My uncle was a captain in the USMC in Vietnam. He was wounded twice in combat, and received at least one Purple Heart. He sank into a deep depression near the end of the war as a result of guilt over the deaths of some of the men under his command. As PTSD wasn't even considered a real thing at the time, he did not receive an honorable discharge at war's end, and he dealt with severe depression for almost 3 decades after that. He told me the following story recently, as for many years he wouldn't speak about his experiences. He and his men had, after hard fighting and some casualties taken, captured a VC bunker. This was when the war was already going pretty badly, so the military jumped on it as an opportunity for good PR. One of the big brass, Brigadier General, I think, decided that my uncle and his chewed-up unit, which had just gotten back to a safe staging zone, should escort the brass and a slew of reporters back out into hostile territory to have a photo op at the bunker he and his men had captured. On the way they were ambushed by the VC, first with mortars, and then engaged directly. 4 of his men died in the mortar attack, and 3 more in the firefight. He himself was wounded by mortars, nearly severed 2 of his fingers. In the middle of it all, the general, who was freaking out, came running up to my uncle, waving and shouting Captain _ Captain _ at the top of his lungs. Already furious over the loss of his men on such a stupid and pointless mission, he got even madder at the fact that this idiot bigwig was loudly identifying an officer in the field for any enemy to target. His response, to snap to attention and fire off the crispest, most deferential salute he could muster, yelling "Yes sir, General sir," at the top of his lungs, to make sure that any enemy looking for a target would have no doubt who was the highest value target, and maybe do him a favor and put a bullet in the idiot. Sadly, no such luck. But the total waste of his men, that's what stuck with him most. I found out recently that he had been taking out a small ad in the Marine Corps magazine with the names of all the men who died under his command, for years and years. A few years ago, the military finally upgraded his discharge and awarded him all the back pay he was owed, and he used the money to travel to DC to see the memorial for the first time. It did him a world of good. So I'm a medic back stateside and work EMS. We get this call one night for unconscious unknown. Dispatch has the wife on the phone but she is in hysterics. We roll up on scene and as we are walking in the front door dispatch upgrades it to a full box and says it's a gunshot wound. I remember looking at my radio in kind of shock. They always tell us scene safety comes first, and I'm standing in the entrance of a house where someone just shot someone. So I hear some commotion from the next room, kinda like a dining room area. Well, this guy is standing there with blood all over himself motioning us farther into the house. So I said fuck it, I'm here already, my partner is already walking in the room I am going to. There is this guy, sitting at the table facing me making this horrible gurgling, scream sound, with his lower face just split in pieces. You could see where he had put the gun under his head and instead of pointing it straight up angled it forward. Load and go, we get this dude in the back and he is just out of it. I've got to hold his jaws wide since it's in 2 pieces so we can intubate him. We get the tube, bolusing fluids and one of the firefighters is driving like a bat out of hell to the nearest trauma center. Traumas in the back of a rig are hectic no doubt, but this one was a blur, med after med, constant vitals, listening to make sure the tube is in place. But there was one instance where this dude comes out of it, for 10 seconds he is still, and he makes eye contact with me. Singular, since the other eye is out of its socket and we have it wrapped up. All I could see was regret. He just looked at me for 10 seconds, he blinked once, looked straight at the ceiling of the rig and was unconscious. Anyways, we get him to the center and rush him in. Everyone is waiting for him, big ass group of people, and they take him to their bed and start working. We give report and we are walking back out again. My partner is standing at the back of the ambulance just staring in. There is blood everywhere, little chunks of red, some white pieces, shattered bone or teeth. And this young girl comes out and hands us 2 pairs of scrubs. She said thank you for your service, and we changed right there in the ambulance bay. Most miserable ride back to station ever. Dude just got back from deployment, was a real door kicker, operator as fuck, and had just found out his wife was fucking other dudes and wanted a divorce. Drank himself into a stupor and shot himself in the head.
Hey guys, this is the Rogue YouTuber here. I recently had a big change in my life. I had a baby daughter. Here she is. If you could do me a favor and remember to hit the subscribe button and bang the bell, I'm hoping to really create a YouTube channel that really gets people excited and brings people the best, most interesting content collated from across the internet. I'm saving up to save my little girl to Carnegie Mellon Computer Science Department. So please remember to like and subscribe. See you next time.